lady joining us on the line right now. Always appreciate it when she takes some time to join us. Of course, she is a U.S. rep for Nevada's 1st Congressional District since 2013. Also was a rep for Nevada's 3rd Congressional District in 2009 and 2011. That would be U.S. Congresswoman Dina TItus, who joins us right now on the line. Congresswoman, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
Well, I'm great, thank you. Excuse me. How my two favorite radio guys doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you very much for being here. My co-host is on vacation. I don't know if he deserves it, but I'm still here, Dina. We always appreciate it when you come on our show. And so much to get to in a short period of time. I want to start with coronavirus, if I may. I'm sure you've seen the latest stats and an increase in the number of occupied beds in the Clark County, intensive care units in Southern Nevada reaching 89%. And this all comes, and ventilators, by the way, up as well, raising 42%. This all comes at a time where there are still people, Dina, who refuse to wear a mask. And they have these anti-mask rallies we were just talking about. What do you make of this? Why the uptick? And do you think it's mainly because people are just being irresponsible?
Well, yes, to that latter question. Excuse me. I think the governor has been very good about following the science. And I don't know why I can't talk this morning. I'm sorry. And
That's okay.
Requiring masks. I was on a Homeland Security hearing yesterday. All the experts, including the governor of Illinois, said, yes, wear a mask. It's not just for your protection. It's for other people's protection. How in the world this president has turned doing something smart for your health into a political issue about liberty, I don't know. He's the one who's being irresponsible. But you're right. You see all these videos of people just going berserk in stores saying, I'm not wearing any mask, and using all kind of expletives. We know that if you wear the mask, you've seen the evidence, you saw it in Illinois, that and do social distancing, that helps bring down the curve, and that's the way you're going to get back to work and save the economy.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Save lives.
I agree with you. I think, I'll say it. You don't have to. I just think some of these people are some of the dumbest people in society. I mean, I really don't know what else to say. And it's so irresponsible, and it takes away from everything we've done, being in quarantine as long as we have. And it's just terrible. And we hope these people will see the forest through the trees, for lack of a better term, and put on the mask.
Right. And they're not just being stupid and putting themselves in danger. They're endangering all the people around them, and they just have no sense of community or service, or we're in this together. And, you make a little bit of a sacrifice for a short time for the good down the road, and they just don't see that. They've been ginned up by this president saying, 99% of the cases aren't
exactly. Yeah.
You don't have to wear a mask.
Exactly. Dina, this is the analogy that I use before we move on. I use the analogy of it's kind of like drunk driving. You're not just putting your life at risk when you get into a car drunk. You're playing Russian roulette with society. And when I say it's not just about your freedom if you don't wear a mask, if you don't wear a mask, you're putting everybody else at risk. To me, it's just like drunk driving. I know drunk driving is against the law and this is a mandate, but that's the analogy that I make. Do you agree with that?
I do. I think that's a very good one. It hits it right on the head, too. That you are endangering others, and it's for some things have to be for the good of society.
Yes,
and I do not see how wearing a mask hurts your liberty. Good grief.
No, it doesn't at all. And let's talk about the kids now and going back to school. As you know, Congresswoman, Donald Trump and his administration is now putting pressure on governors in every state to open up the schools. Well, Dr. Birx was interviewed yesterday, and she admitted herself that those in Donald Trump's administration have no idea what the child virus transmission infection rate is. So if that's the case, how can we be pushing opening up the schools too soon?
Well, that's right. At first, we thought this was something that hit older people, but you're seeing more and more cases in young children. Plus, there are teachers there, there are administrators there, there are groundskeepers, and those children go home to their families. So opening it up too soon and not doing it in a way that science dictates. And, the CDC came out with some guidelines. This is the president's own CDC, and now he's pressuring them to change those guidelines. And Pence just yesterday said, well, those guidelines shouldn't be any reason to stop schools from opening. He has this notion that open schools will make things look like it's all back to normal, and it's not.
Yeah, don't even get me started with Mike Pence. I think he just wants to pray this virus away. I don't think he's on the right track. Let's put it that way. But I want to talk to you. Let me ask you this before we move on. Do you think, Congresswoman, that there is a decent chance that the Strip could close down again if these numbers keep rising? And do you think we could see that across the country where the economy could shut down again? Do you see that as a strong possibility?
Well, I certainly hope not. And I think that we've been much smarter here about opening than some places. You saw Florida just go wide open, and now they're having to roll back some of that. Georgia the same way. So Steve didn't move into the next phase, and I think that was smart. But I certainly hope we don't have to roll back, because then it'll be even harder to climb out of this economic
Agree.
crack.
Agree, and that's even more reason why people need to wear masks right now. You can't shout out, keep the economy open, and then not wear a mask. You can't have it both ways. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with U.S. Congresswoman Dina TItus. Dina, I hear this rumor that Donald Trump is considering a nuclear, testing nukes right here in Nevada. Can you tell us anything about that? What do you know about this?
Yes, we saw that. He had mentioned that this would be a possibility. You know, he likes to play the strong man. And I think he thought if we're blowing up some nuclear weapons, then that'll make us look more powerful versus China, Russia, and maybe North Korea. We immediately got to work on that because, you know, people in Nevada have already sacrificed. We have some real Cold War patriots who spent a long time at the test site back during the 50s and early 60s. We've already done our share. We certainly don't want to see weapons tested here again that might harm the health of Nevadans. But also internationally, we start blowing up weapons. Certainly the other countries that have them will too. We have the DOE here who checks these weapons every year with subcritical tests that are much more sophisticated than the old blowing up bomb test. And they are able to tell that our weapons are still viable. They can do a lot of scientific experiments. We don't need to blow up some more bombs. And so I think that this was absolutely the wrong thing to do, and immediately put in several bills and amendments to say you couldn't use any federal dollars to do that.
Good, and I'm glad you guys did that because we don't need that, especially at a time like now where the focus should be on other issues like this pandemic. I want to ask you a little bit about a Supreme Court decision that went down this morning, which I'm sure you've heard. It came down a few hours ago. That is the Donald Trump tax returns. Now, you hear about the bounty that Russia allegedly put on U.S. troops. And then we wonder why, we hear rumors, and we had Congressman Seth Moulton on last week, and we love Seth. He comes on our show all the time. And he says, there's probably a reason why perhaps those in the intelligence were afraid to even tell Donald Trump about that, in fear that Trump would go and tell Vladimir Putin. And I say to myself, what does Putin have on Donald Trump? And I go back to the tax returns. And now the Supreme Court decision, I don't think we'll be seeing his tax returns anytime soon. But certainly this is a win for those Democrats out there that want to see Donald Trump's tax returns. What do you make of this decision, and what do you make of that whole situation with the bounty on American troops?
Well, we've had several briefings on that, and the intelligence was obviously there. It appeared in the daily briefing that he receives. I don't know if he reads those or not. Apparently he doesn't like to. And you're right, people didn't want to tell him something he didn't want to hear because they didn't know what he was going to do. Certainly his cozy relationship with Putin throughout his entire administration, and most recently wanting to invite Russia back into the G7 or G8 is very disturbing and very makes you suspicious. As you said, what does Putin have over Trump, or does he just like to pal around with these kind of strongmen leaders? The Supreme Court decision, I thought, was a real victory for the American people to finally get to see tax returns that every other president has turned over in the past. And remember, this is a Supreme Court that has two of Donald Trump's own appointees on it. So it wasn't just a Democratic decision. And it's a decision that goes beyond just his taxes. It's a decision about separation of powers and transparency and what we're entitled to know and what the president can deny giving to Congress in its oversight role.
Sure. So, Congresswoman, if I could go back briefly, you've been in some of those briefings. I want to go back to this possible bounty on U.S. troops. I know there's certain things that you cannot tell us and cannot talk about, but can you go a little bit deeper and specifically and what you learned that you can tell us? And is there any doubt in your mind that Donald Trump didn't or did know what was going on? And why is the White House not doing anything right now to get down to the bottom of this?
I know, isn't that interesting how long has passed since this came out? and he's more concerned about who leaked the information than about going after Russia now that he does know about it. He first said he didn't know about it. He said he hadn't been briefed. Then he said it was in the briefing, but it wasn't important. Then he said, well, the intelligence wasn't that sure about it. But the more we hear, the more we're convinced that he had that information, and he just chose not to act on it. And he had it for a good long while.
If I had to ask you, and I know it is some speculation, but if I had to ask you why, Congresswoman, why did he not act on this information? Why would he knowingly put troops in harm's way and not act on this? What would be your answer to that?
You know, I am always astounded by what this president does. Every time I think he can't get any worse, he does something like this. You know, it's the role of the commander-in-chief, and that's one of the main hats that the president wears, to first keep our soldiers safe when we send them out there to protect us and protect democracy. And if you can't even do that, it is a terrible dereliction of duty.
I want to end this interview and ask you a little bit about Joe Biden. Obviously, I know you're a supporter of Joe Biden. I said recently there's no doubt that I'm going to be supporting Joe Biden as well.
Riding with Biden.
Riding with Biden. That's right.
Still riding with Biden, right?
A little accent, riding with Biden.
I like it. You know, I'm voting for Joe Biden, and it has nothing to do with politics, believe it or not. It has to do with the fact that I believe and I know that Joe Biden is a decent man. He is a decent human being, and I think we need it in the White House. And when people want to talk about policy, I say, listen, that's not why I'm voting for Joe Biden. I'm voting for Joe Biden because I think he's a decent man, and we need that in the White House now. And the attacks on the right on Joe Biden, you know, he's been staying in his basement. It was a few weeks ago where Donald Trump attacked Joe Biden for not wearing a mask. Now all of a sudden it's okay to wear a mask, according to Donald Trump, even though he won't wear one. People going after, you know, Joe Biden's mental acuity. I mean, the list goes on. And I say to myself that people are just so disrespectful and then say, well, look at what they're doing to Donald Trump. Look at what the media is doing to Donald Trump. Donald Trump does it to himself. Look at the way he talks to people. Look at the way he treats people. Joe Biden, in my opinion, and I think you'll agree on this, you know, he's a man, a decent human being. He treats people with respect. Look at what he just did with George Floyd. I mean, he and his wife, Jill Biden, went out there and met with George Floyd's family for hours. Donald Trump picks up the phone for 5 minutes. To me, that's a perfect example of why I'm supporting Joe Biden. What do you say?
I think that's right. And the American people are just so ready for somebody who will lead from the head and from the heart, who can bring this country back together, who has compassion, experience, and knowledge. And attacking Joe Biden in any of those areas is very difficult for this president to do. But the problem is the president's vicious. He'll do anything to try to win, and he doesn't have anything else to run on. He can't talk about the economy. It's crashed. Can't talk about his leadership in the COVID virus because everybody knows that's been abominable. What else can he do but try to attack Joe Biden? And if you notice in the polls, Joe Biden is increasingly moving up, and not just nationally, but in the key states, in states that Trump won before. So those attacks don't seem to be working.
I agree with you. If you look at polls nationally, even a Fox News poll that came out recently, couldn't agree with you more on that one. The facts speak for themselves. Congresswoman, I always appreciate it when you come on our show and take some time to join us, your insight. Keep up the great work. I appreciate you, Congresswoman, and we'll talk soon, okay?
You too. Call us back, and you stay safe out there. Wear a mask.
Thank you. No doubt. I'm not one of those anti-maskers, that's for sure. I'll gladly put one on. Congresswoman Dina TItus, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. There you go. Always appreciate it. Riding with Biden. I like that. I like it. I love that accent. That works for me. I like it. Riding with Biden. I like it. Sounds good. Don't you think, Stein? It's a little catchy, don't you think?
Especially the way she says it.
Yeah, well, it's better than me, of course. I'm just, I'm strictly New York accent. Riding with Biden. You know, the Bronx. My mom's from the Bronx.